Hey there, it's Jason Gorman from Codemanship with a special, hopefully this might be a little series of video diary entries. I know it's been a while and I apologize for that, but I've been rather busy. Now, I wanted to sort of get down some thoughts and get a little bit of sort of practical hands-on with ChatGPT. Unless you've been living under a rock for the last couple of weeks, you will probably have heard of this. It's called a large language model, and it falls under the banner of what's usually referred to as generative AI, generative artificial intelligence. And what it does, basically, it's been trained on a massive amount of text from the internet, including large amounts of program code, and it spots patterns within that text, and it very cleverly is able to match patterns in a request or a message to the patterns that it's been trained on, that it's discovered in code, for example, and produce a response that is uncannily like the response you'd get from a real human being or a real programmer. Now, I've been through many hype cycles of people telling me that this technology is going to revolutionize the world of software development, and ChatGPT is no exception. People, when they talk about it in terms of software development, tend to fall into three camps. The first camp is the skeptics. I'm a skeptic who don't think it's going to make that much of a difference, really. And then you've got people who are more upbeat about it, but there's still a bit of healthy skepticism there, who think, well, it could be useful in limited use cases, limited circumstances, and it will make it could make a big difference. And then there are the people who are 100% all in, who think this is going to replace programmers, or it's going to replace lots of programmers. So you hear people saying, oh, you'll only need one developer when you needed 10, et cetera, et cetera. I'm very much at the other end, the opposite end of that camp. And I've, over recent weeks, experimented with GPT 3.5. That was the previous version of ChatGPT, the AI engine that it runs on. I've upgraded to ChatGPT Plus, which gives me some access to, as you'll see, it's limited access. You have a limited number of messages you can send it within a 3-hour window, but it gives me some access to the latest model of GPT, which is GPT-4. So I'm going to be using the GPT-4 large language model, which you can see there. Let's just take a comparison. So GPT 3.5 is fast. It's kind of average at reasoning, not very concise with its answers. GPT-4, much better at reasoning, much more concise, apparently, in its answers, but slower, considerably slower, about 60% slower. And as I said, access to the GPT engine is limited. Even if you pay $20 a month, you still get limited access to it in terms of the number of messages or how frequently you can send it messages. At the moment, I think it's limited to 25 in a 3-hour window. So over the course of a working day, you might get a couple of sessions with it. So in that sense, it definitely isn't going to replace programmers, particularly as more and more people accessing it means that they're going to start throttling those limits. So it's going to be something that you would need to use a little sparingly. Okay, now, I've already tried this. And it was an attempt that did not go very well, where I've got a business problem I want it to solve. So I'm not going to ask it to do some kind of self-contained thing, like make me a calendar scheduling application, or make me a notepad application or something, or make me Space Invaders, but for the Xbox, which you may find there are videos out there on YouTube of people doing that kind of thing and being very impressed with the results. But what happens when the requirements are specific, when you're presenting with problems it's maybe not seen before? What kind of results will we get then? Now, yesterday when I tried this, and it did not go well, what happened was I sort of gave it all of the requirements. Let's just show you what we've got here. This is for an upcoming thing, probably going to be live sort of next year, for half-day self-contained training sessions through Codemanship. And the business problem with that is it's usually just me running this business. And that means that I do, as well as delivering the training and writing the training, I also have to prep for the training. I have to do all of the commercial stuff, the paperwork, invoicing, sales negotiations, all those kind of things that go on. And so if I'm only doing one or two sort of large courses, so currently codemanship courses sort of range between 1 and 3 days. So they kind of, let's call them full fat courses. You get everything on a TDD course or a codecraft course over the course of 3 days, although there is some flexibility about how that's delivered in terms of timings, but it's still a 3-day course. And I thought, well, let's break the course modules down. And what if I could make those modules self-contained and then give students more time for the practical hands-on exercise in each module. So more time for hands-on stuff, but also the ability to either dip in and say, well, we'd like to have that workshop, we'd like to have that workshop, or as I'm planning to also have the option to have a sort of a roadmap. So particularly if you're taking on new developers or apprentices, to have like a 16-week roadmap made up of 12 taught modules and some assessments as well, so they could sort of see how they're going. So that's all by the by. That's not going to happen until next year because there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But it occurred to me, if I'm organising half-day workshops, there's going to be more of them every month. There might be 2 or 3 in a given week. And organising all the logistics and everything else and all the commercial stuff for 1 or 2 full fat courses every month is very easy for me to handle. But trying to organize 2 or 3 of those a week for different clients and different workshops, then it gets very, I'm going to be run ragged, basically. They'll be running me in circles. So that's the business problem I'm trying to solve. What I'd like to do is make it so that as much as possible, clients can schedule their own workshops and invite their own students, their own developers to sign up and enroll for workshops. And then joining instructions will be automatically sent, maybe a couple of days before the workshop is scheduled, and that kind of thing. So we're starting on a use case of scheduling a training workshop. And originally what I did is I gave it the full explanation. That's all of this text here, which I spent a bit of time thinking about, and said, can you build me this, please? And it had a fair go at it. But there were some things, first of all, in terms of requirements or business rules that it got wrong or it missed out. But also the code itself I was not happy with at all. So I sort of started instructing it to refactor the code, and then we started writing tests for it. We ended up sort of going around in circles because one of the things, as you're about to discover with large language models, is the way they work is if you ask them to show you something, they will generate it. They will generate it again. In other words, if you say, oh, can you show me that HTML that we were working on, it will write the HTML again, and it will do it in an intelligent way, in the sense that it won't just reproduce what you already had, it'll just write it again. So we ended up sort of locked in this battle, basically, where I was trying to get source listings so I could import them into my Python project and run them and run the tests. And it kept moving the goalpost. It kept actually rewriting the code. Things that I'd asked it to fix, refactorings I'd asked it to do, it would then revert back to the way it'd done it before. It would write code that I hadn't asked for. It was a bit of a nightmare, basically. Now, the purpose of this video is to demonstrate something very specific. I realized, first of all, trying to do it all in one go, probably not a great idea. So I thought, well, what if we break it down and sort of work one example at a time, which immediately made me think, well, test-driven development seems to be the way to do it then. So I'll show it this description of the problem, but then a little further down, as you'll see, we've got test cases like schedule a workshop. There's a happy path case here for scheduling a workshop inside working hours on a working day. And then I've given it a little example there to work from. And then there's another test case here and another example and so on and so forth. So I've got a few of these fleshed out. So this is a bit like less formal, but a bit like the sort of the process of specification by example, basically. So this is something we would do with a real customer. So it's a bit more real world. It's a bit more realistic, and hopefully it's a problem that that GPT has not been trained on. It's not seen anything exactly like this before. So it's going to have to try and solve the problem using its, in inverted commas, reasoning, in this case language reasoning, to try and figure out what the solution might be. So what I'm going to be doing is we're going to be doing some pair programming where I'm going to be the navigator. I'm going to tell GPT what I want it to do, and it's going to be the driver. It's going to write that code. And I'm learning the lesson from yesterday, which is when it gives you code, you take it straight away. Because, as I said, it has a tendency to rewrite it. So when it gives me code, it'll take it straight away. And then I will import that. I've got a copy and paste it, basically. It's not that sophisticated. I will copy and paste that code that it's giving me into this Python project, and then we can hopefully get the tests running fairly quickly. So I'm going to ask it to start by writing a test based on the example I give it. And then I'm going to ask it to write the simplest code that will pass that test. And we'll kind of work in that manner. And of course, there will almost undoubtedly be some refactoring that is required as well. So I'll ask it to do some refactorings. Keeping my copy of the code and its understanding of the code in step is the thing that I found to be very, very difficult. Very, very difficult. And I do have a practical suggestion for that, which we'll get to hopefully at the end of the video. So if you're listening, OpenAI and Microsoft, then, I'm not claiming I've solved your problem, but I am imagining as a developer something that might make life a little easier for us all. I might get that integration between GPT and me as the developer much, much tighter and much more, much safer. Okay, now, let's go back to our problem then. So what I'm going to do first of all is just copy and paste this description. So we're going to introduce ourselves to our pairing partner. So hi there. I would like to do some test-driven development with you in Python. First of all, let me explain my use case. Don't generate any code yet. I will give you one test case at a time later. So let's see what it says. So I think I've got how many interactions left in this 3-hour period. You can see cap of 25 messages every 3 hours. So we're not going to get a lot of time with ChatGPT maybe, but you'll be able to see how this kind of works or how it could work. Right. So we've said hello. One as you're ready. Okay, so that's a more succinct answer than I got yesterday. That's good. So first of all, let's paste in our use case. Providing the use case now that I understand the requirements. Well, we'll see about that. Please provide me with the first test case and I'll help you write the test and implement the functionality using it. Okay. Thanks. Please write only the test for this case. And I will paste in my first test case. So let's just quickly go through this so you can see it. So my first case for scheduling training workshops, scheduling a workshop to start inside working hours, which is basically I will start a workshop anytime after 8 a.m. in the morning, that's UK time, and anytime before 6 p.m. So that's the kind of window for starting workshops. On a working day, so that's Monday to Friday, where no workshops or preparation day. So every workshop requires a day of preparation the day before. So that's usually much of that time, apart from just getting all the right source code and checking everything's working. Usually that involves me just wrapping my head around that programming language again, because I work in Python, C#, JavaScript, and Java, plus other languages when I'm coaching. And so I normally need a day to just refresh my Python or refresh my Java, not just in terms of language, but in terms of tools. So that's the example there. And what we're saying from our example there, which is a developer testing workshop, we've got the client representative name. We'll have more requirements about verifying emails and stuff like that, but we assume that this client is registered at the moment. Demonstration language will be Python. The date for the workshop is the 30th of June 2023 at 9 a.m. London time. And the requested workshop should be scheduled and a preparation day added for the 29th of June 2023. Okay. So let's it's not going to let me add that yet. It said it's just going to waste my time. There we go. Is a test case for scheduling a workshop with given information. So we've got a workshop scheduling a workshop. That's a good start. It's gone object-oriented. I'm liking this. Previous versions of GPT, by the way, had an obsession with procedural code. It was not very impressive. Okay, we've got a bunch of assertions there. That makes me a little unhappy having multiple assertions in a test, because if one of those assertions failed, it might not be clear which one is failing. Okay, this test checks. Right, good. So what I'm going to do, it looks all right to me. Basically, we're scheduling a workshop, and then assert is not none. I'm not sure that we should get a workshop result. What is that workshop result? Assert that the workshop result is equal to the workshop. Assert true. Yeah. So I'm not entirely convinced about this workshop result. So I'm going to say, do we need the workshop result? Do we need the workshop result? So we're starting to give it some feedback now. I'll just bring it down there. You're right. In this case, we don't really need the work. In this case, we simplify just checking. Yes. So there is a level of in inverted commas understanding going on here, and this is the feedback I get from lots of people who've tried GPT, both 3.5 and 4, is that it's very impressive to begin with. This is very impressive if you think about it. Okay, I'm a bit happier with my test. I'm not comfortable. So the other thing I've learned is to not move on until you're happy. So I could take the code as it is, but this is where we got into trouble before. I'm not comfortable with two assertions in the same test. If one fails, it won't be obvious which assertion is failing. Could you, so I'm navigating at a fairly high level, fix that. So I'm trying to get the test right. Now, you see the number of interactions we're having just for this unit test, just to get it into a state that I'm happy with. And as I said, there's a limit of 25 interactions within 3 hours, the same 3-hour window. So there's some practical considerations here. It's going given when then. Okay, we're getting somewhere. A two separate telling a single assertion, making it easier to pinpoint which part of the function might be failing. Okay, so far I'm reasonably happy. The tiny bit of duplication, but rule of 3, it's not something that bothers me in the setup, and you do need to be careful when you remove duplicate setup from tests, so we'll leave that. But I'm just going to scroll back and remind myself, oh yeah, it was doing it all along. Okay, right. So one more thing before, now here's the thing where I'm saying, oh, I could just import this into my code and I could do it. But I don't want to get too far out of step with GPT. So I'm going to ask it to do it. Do we really need the given when then comments? It helps the structure of the test make more readable by separating. You can remove them. Here's the test code without the comments. So it's got what it's saying is a rationale for doing it. It's, you got to remember, it's just copying things it's seen. Like for example, in the Microsoft sort of developer tutorials on unit testing, I mean, there's no reason why it couldn't just leave lines of code between. We could just use white space, but let's go with this. So it's wrong to call it comprehension. It doesn't comprehend. It's wrong to call it understanding. And in terms of reasoning, the reasoning really is reasoning about language. Okay. So we've used up quite a lot of our allotted. So now let's take this code as it is. Let's copy that. And we're going to add that to our. So let's create a new source file. And we'll call this scheduler. It's probably going to call it workshop scheduler. So workshop scheduler test. Okay, in it goes. I'm seeing some red ink at the top. What's happening there? Oh yeah, these things don't exist yet, so we'll need these now. So let's go back to GPT and ask it, please generate the simplest implementation that will pass these tests. And it's off. Let's take a look. This implementation should be sufficient to pass 2 tests provided. We'll soon find out. Okay, and let's take a copy of that code. So what we discovered is, or what I've discovered is, GPT. So it's called it workshop scheduler, and let's just move that. Okay, that was in the wrong folder. Okay, new Python file. So we're going to call this our workshop scheduler. Okay, and there's no red ink there, so that looks okay. And I just need to correct this import to get it from the right package. Okay, so now the moment of truth, we've got no red ink, it should pass the tests. Let's check and see. Yeah, we got both of our tests passing. So that's our first green light, and that is impressive. That is impressive. But that's just the first part of the TDD cycle. Red light, green light. Let's see if we need to do any refactoring. So the test, as I said, I'm reasonably happy with those. There's some source code formatting that we could work with there. There's our classes. I think they're relatively straightforward. So I'm reasonably happy with that. I think we can go with that. And our workshop at the moment is just a data object, but that's fine. If we need any logic, hopefully it will know to put the logic where it belongs, where that data is. We'll see. Right, okay. Let's go back to GPT and say, thank you. Here is the next example. And actually, if we do a, yeah, here is the next example. So we do it in one request because I'm using up all my requests now. So we'll maybe do three test cases on this little demonstration. Let's see what it does. previous test cases. Checks that the workshop day and the preparation day are marked as unavailable after scheduling a workshop. You can update the workshop scheduler class to implement the isDayAvailable method. No, I think I'm going to be asking you to do that. That's how this works. Okay, right. So it's quite a big test, but so we have a workshop, we schedule the workshop, and then we check to see if a day is available. So it's quite smart. So we're going to put this into our test code. So you are at this point, you are kind of simultaneously sort of maintaining your own copy of the code and backing and forthing. And I found that we began to get problems with this. So there's our test. Okay, and now we will need, as it said, back to GPT, getting a little confused there. Could you please write that for me? Off it goes. So the process of sort of keeping yourself in step with what it's doing, it's a manual process at the moment, and it is potentially very error prone. You need to be really keeping an eye on things. And it explains what it's doing as well. And the explanations, that they're not bad. They are a little bit paraphrasy, but okay, let's just take the bit that we need. Okay, hopefully that's all of it, and let's paste that into our workshop scheduler class. We're leaving that as it was. So this is a new method, but let's do the whole class. And it's given me the explanation as well. Generate response. Okay, right. It's a bit better. So hopefully, again, we're not seeing any red ink there, no compile errors, and we've got our extra tests. So let's run all our tests again. So we now have 3 tests, but one of our tests is failing. Test day is unavailable. Okay, why is that failing? True is not false. Okay, let's go back and look at our test. Oh, sorry, there. Right. So what it's saying is, and again, it's done what it did before. It's got 2 assertions, and we don't know which one of them is failing. And we need to figure out why that is. So let's go through this. Actually, no, let's see if it can figure it out. That new test is failing. Actually, let's just quickly look at that. Is day available? Return not date in schedule workshops or date in self-schedule preparation days. Okay. So I'm trying to figure out what it's done here, and I don't want to waste too many requests. So I'm going to try and figure this out for myself. There's a certain problem here, which is we've got these 2 helper methods here. So you give it a workshop or a workshop scheduled. Oh, okay. Is day available. So we're getting some interesting stuff here. Right. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go back to GPT and say that last test is failing. This test is failing. Can you fix it? So I'm giving it very little information there. So I was comparing a data object to a list of workshop objects. That's what it was. That's very impressive. So this is one of the downsides of working in dynamically typed languages, is that I'm not sure I would have spotted that. But that raises another issue, which is I'm not sure I would have spotted that. It would have taken me a while to figure that out because I didn't write that code. And what I'm finding with GPT is that it makes me nervous with the amount of code that it's generating that I didn't write. And so I feel an urge to stop and review the code very carefully. And since that typically takes longer than it does to write it in the first place, I'm skeptical about how much time I'm actually saving by doing this. We're some way into this video now, and how much time am I really saving? Okay, now the is day available method correctly checks for workshop and preparation day by comparing the date objects. Okay, now let's first of all take the revised test. Okay, and we'll poke that back into our project. So this process of sort of manually keeping everything in step it just feels a little precarious. Oops, and that one as well. It feels a little precarious. You'll notice also, oh, a lot of stuff failing now, and that's because I'm Z. That's because the copying and pasting isn't working. So I guess I do, because I'm just trying to take that. But when I copy, Control C, it's bringing the whole thing with it. Let's try again. Okay, that's a bit more like it. No red ink this time. You will notice it started doing given, when, then again. And this is something that I found with it, that we have a discussion and it agrees, sometimes begrudgingly, sometimes it argues, it agrees, and then you'll notice a while later it's gone back to doing it. So need to keep an eye on that. So I'm going to do that again, rather than waste a request. I'm going to take those out myself and leave in some white space to break up the test and make it more readable. If you're listening, GPT folks. Right, let's try again now. No, okay. Oh yeah, I need to update the workshop scheduler as well. That would help. So let's go back to GPT and get that code too. Okay, updated the tests. So is day available? That's the one I'm interested in. I think if I do it backwards, it's less likely to take the rest of it. Okay. So let's paste that into there. Doesn't this make me feel, I'm always telling developers, please don't copy and paste code for all kinds of reasons. Right, we've got a bit of red ink now. Where is the red ink? Days equals, I don't see what's wrong with that. Okay, it's gone. It was just catching up with itself there in the background. Okay, let's try it again. And our tests are now passing. Whip-de-doo. So I'm reasonably happy with the results that we're getting, and I'm reasonably happy with this code. It's a lot simpler than the code I was getting from GPT 3.5, and so kind of happy about that. Let's go back to our test code. That's looking okay. But again, the same problem. I complained about two assertions in the same test. I kind of agreed, said, oh yeah, okay, fix that, and then immediately does it again because it doesn't actually learn while we're talking to it necessarily. Okay, and that can be very frustrating. That can be like pairing with someone that never ever learns. They'll learn it like goldfish. They'll learn it once and then they'll forget it. Very frustrating. But there you go. That's the way it is. That's the way it works. Let's create a bit more white space for myself here. Okay, and just a formatting thing for Python. Back to GPT with our next example. So weekends are not available for workshops, but are available for preparation days. Okay. If I got all of that example there, yeah. So back to GPT. Next test case. Don't need to worry too much about formatting. It is very impressive just how loose you can be with your language and it still sort of get the gist of it. That is very, very impressive. Okay, off it goes. Let's see what it does. It's doing the give and when then again. And the thing is that how many interactions do I want to waste, and how much time do I want to spend cleaning up things that it's already in inverted commas learned not to do from me? And again, multiple assertions in the same test. Okay, that's not bad. That's not bad. So it took the dates that I gave it, marked as unavailable for workshops, while a working day is marked as available. So it's kind of reiterating the requirements back to me. Let's take our test, and we can remove the given when then later. Let's copy that, paste it into our project. So this whole process of copying and pasting between them is jolly annoying. So, but I'm going to do it anyway. Okay. Now, here's an interesting thing. Right. Okay. Yep. That's about the least we could do in that test. Let's see if it, well, it won't pass because let's just see it fail. It's a good idea to see it fail. It's failing because attribute error. Okay, is a day available for workshop? I'm a little confused. If we go back to our scheduler, we've got is day available and then is day available for workshop. So this is, I found as we go through a few of these TDD cycles that it starts to come unstuck because its model of the code is not the same as my model of the code. It doesn't really remember the code in the way that you think it does. It very much lives in the moment. And so things start to get out of step. But I said at the end of the video, we will talk about that. We will discuss that. So anyway, let's make it write the code. Now, please write the code needed to pass this test. Okay. It's not keeping a count. I was hoping it would give me like a little count, like you have used so many interactions, you have so many left or whatever. But it doesn't do that. Okay, let's take a look at what it's generating. So it's rewriting the scheduler again. So it seems to be working at the class level. Okay, schedule workshop is the same. Is workshop scheduled? Is preparation day scheduled? And is day available? Is day available for workshop? So it's distinguishing between those two things. Right. Yeah, that's a little confusing, but so it's kind of doing stuff that the way it's getting around things seems to be to doing everything in sort of separately, rather than saying, oh, I need to change is day available, for example. It's going, oh, and I'll need another method for that. Okay, but we'll go with that. Let's put that in our project and see if that works. It's day available. So let's see if all our tests go green. 4 green tests. So that is very impressive. If date.weekday less greater than or equal to 5. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so there's some stuff here we could do. and I'm going to we're kind of on another refactoring step. So let's see if we can do some refactorings. I think maybe it's thinking is the wrong word, but maybe it's kind of going with a different plan. So what I'm going to ask it to do instead is this. We have a comment. We have a comment here. And comments are considered a code smell. Comment is describing what that means. Let's see if GPT-4 can figure out how to refactor it so that to explain what that means without using a comment. Let's see how good it is at that kind of thing. So could you refactor this code to explain the meaning of without using a comment? Play along at home. What would you do if you were trying to explain what that expression meant without using a comment? Let's see if ChatGPT can figure that out. Sure, you can creating a helper method called isWeekend that checks if the given day is a weekend. This way the code becomes more self-explanatory. Workshops append. Okay, so our workshop scheduler still kind of sort of looking at the same. Okay, that's good. That's good. Right. We'll take it. Right. So we'll have to take, oops, that's what I did before. Let's try again. So working up from here. Oops. Just scrolls a little fast for my liking. Okay. Control C. Into our project. So we'll do the whole thing just to be nice and clean. Okay. And let's now rerun our tests and make sure that's still passing. So that's good. So as I said, it's starting to look a little messy here. Is workshop scheduled? So I would ask questions like, do we really need to know if a workshop is scheduled? Because it wouldn't exist if it wasn't. Is a preparation day scheduled? Is day available? So there's a bunch of stuff here that I don't think we really need to know in terms of our tests. If we schedule a workshop, we want to know that that workshop is scheduled on the correct date, and et cetera, et cetera. We also want to know that the day before the workshop is no longer available because it's so we really just need is day available. And I'm trying to figure out in my head again because I did not write this code how we could do it so that we just know whether or not a day we can test it by knowing whether or not a certain day is available. So I'm just going to ask the question: is it possible we could test this functionality just using um, is day available and is workshop scheduled? I'm not entirely convinced. Is workshop scheduled? All we're really doing is saying it's in that collection, it's in that list of workshops. We want to know if it's on what day is it scheduled, and checking the date when a workshop was scheduled to see if it has been scheduled on that date. So a lot of the time I've noticed when I'm working with GPT, a lot of the time I'm spending is what question should I ask? Because be very careful what you wish for, basically. I'm not sure that's clear. Is it possible we could test this functionality just using is there available? And checking the date when a workshop was scheduled to see if it's been scheduled on that date. So this is quite a big change. Now at this point, it would really need to rewrite the other tests. And okay. Does not consider weekends as unavailable. Just tested using is there available and checking the date. So this is quite a big change that I'm asking to make, and it hasn't done all of it. It's just showing me how to do it at this point. So really, it's kind of suggesting that I might want to do it. So I'm going to go a little further here. Could first of all, let's take this new code. So this is it's a day available. Okay. Now, this might make our tests fail. No, they still work because it wasn't testing for that case. Okay. So what we're hoping is, can we make this redundant? Okay. So we don't want really that. We're just asking, is this available for scheduling a workshop on? The rest we shouldn't need to do. We want to know when a workshop is scheduled. Okay, workshop scheduler test. So let's go back to chat and say, look, could you rewrite all of the tests to work this way so we can remove some of the helper methods we don't need in workshop scheduler. I'm going to be a bit more specific and see if it knows what this means. Query methods. Okay. Tests. So if this was a real pairing situation, I've grabbed the keyboard a few times in the sense of I've changed some stuff that it's given me, and it's doing the given when then again. So this is the frustrating thing, is that the danger is you end up in a situation where effectively you're trying to keep everything in step. And it's overwriting you. It keeps moving the goalposts, often going back to the way it was doing before. And that is very difficult to keep in step with. In fact, on a problem even of this size, kind of, impossible, really. It's just a lot of work to be constantly revisiting things it's done in a way that you told it to stop doing or to do differently. But we'll go with this. And then we'll talk at the end of the video about what I think the developers of OpenAI and I think it's Copilot that they're planning to integrate it into. So hopefully integration with IDEs will get much better. But I'm thinking like as an interim step, there might be things that we could do that would make life a little easier. Okay, so it's doing all the things in the test that I've been telling it not to do. And it's noted there's a bunch of stuff we can remove there to simplify. Here's the updated work schedule class. Let's see. So that is you've got to admit that is greatly simplified. We schedule a workshop and then we just because the whole point of this really, because we do want our workshop in ultimately in the database, but for the purposes of this, we just need to know when we look at our calendar view, if we give it a date, it can tell us whether or not we're allowed to schedule a new workshop on that date. Okay, right. So let's take that code. And down. Oh, scrolling. See, it won't scroll if I go down. It will only scroll if I go up. So let's just take the bit that I want. We'll see. And put that in here. In our workshop scheduler. So our logic is now, yeah, because there's a whole bunch of stuff here, basically. Let's go back and replace that. Okay, and yeah, weekend is missing. Okay, right. So don't trust that it's the complete class. I guess we'll need to leave is weekend. Oops. So as I said, this manual process of keeping things in step at a larger scale, I think, is unworkable. Inevitably, problems will happen. Damn it. Why have I not got the whole thing there? So class workshop. What's missing from here? Right, let's try again. Yeah, not a pretty process. Down we go. Take a look at it. So essentially what it's done here what it's done here is it hasn't actually finished the code. It's just telling me you can delete those other methods. I think that's what it's telling me. Let's take a look. So you need to keep a very close eye on it. So I think what it's saying is this can go. No, I'll take we need to go all the way back. So our workshop scheduler and oops. Let's just take out the bits that we're not using anymore. Is day available, is weekend are the only bits left that we're actually using. And then we'll take that new test code. I think that's it. We'll soon find out. Okay. And let me just go back, scroll back up and we'll find that new test code. I think that's all of it. Okay, so we'll just do the whole thing as one and fix the import. So you can imagine trying to do this at scale in this sort of manual copying and pasting, keeping things in check kind of way. And you can also imagine, hopefully, how annoying it is to have a pairing partner that doesn't learn. It's learned what it's learned, basically. And it doesn't seem to sort of learn when you say, hey, don't do it that way, do it this way. It will, next time it needs to do something like that, it will just do it the way it's always done it. Right, now I'm not seeing any red ink, so we don't have any compile errors by the looks of it. Let's see. Okay, we've got 3 passing tests. Let's see if we've got all of our test cases here. Yeah, because it's put, yeah, We had more tests before because I'd asked it to refactor the test code. So let's do it one more time, just for jolly. Could you please refactor the test code to remove the given when then comments and ensure every test only has one assertion. This will be our last, and a question mark. Now it's leaving white space, or not, at random intervals. Now we do have now we do have a lot of duplication in our setups, but there you go. Thank you very much. Right, let's take all of that test code. One final. So let's copy that code into our project. Let's fix the import. So you could probably imagine on a larger scale, on a real world project, that this would become very, very time consuming and quite infuriating. And it would be very difficult to keep track of the differences between my code and what ChatGPT says. Now, I could just keep resupplying the code to ChatGPT, but as the project grows and as we get more and more files, that becomes more and more complicated. So this is not a process that really scales to larger problems, but the results we've had so far are interesting, in many ways impressive, in some ways not so impressive. Let's just for peace of mind, one last time, run the tests. All 6 of our tests now are passing. So we've got the beginnings of our workshop scheduler. There's more requirements, of course. We're some way into this problem. We've got a bunch of tests for it. The moment of truth, I'm wondering if I can get a coverage report. So let's see how good our... okay, yeah, I need to install coverage.py. Always forget to do that. And normally at this point, I would be spending a lot of time reviewing the code and checking that it is up to snuff, as it were, up to scratch. And off it goes. Right. So we're expecting our test coverage. It's only a small amount of code, but we're expecting it to be 100%, yeah? Okay. And in our source code, 100% of our files are covered. In our test code, okay, that's interesting. What's missing? Have we got code in our test that's not being covered? I don't think so. They're all being executed, so I don't really know. There's a little bit at the end there that we're not using, but that's fine. Okay, oh, 97% of lines are covered. That's fine. So it's just that line of code because we're not using it. We're running it using the IDE. Okay, so I'm semi-happy with that result. I am, having tried this a few times now, I am becoming aware of the amount of work you have to put in to get GPT to do what you want it to do. So one observation I will make, people out there are some people out there, misguided people, and they come along every few years when the latest whizzy thing comes along, whether it's no code or an inference engine or a code generation engine or whatever it is. They come along and they say, oh, we won't need programmers anymore. You can probably guess from what we've been doing that I don't believe that. You need to be a programmer to drive this process. You can't just be a customer sitting there, because you have to think like a programmer in order to talk to GPT. And ideally, you also need to be able to think like a customer. So I could see maybe with GPT-5 or beyond, the situation where customers will sit with programmers and will agree examples for requirements, and that process could happen in real time. We're certainly not there yet. And as the problems, the solution space starts to grow, it gets harder and harder to keep everything in step. And as I said, GPT keeps moving the goalposts, not as badly as it did with 3.5 when it would do complete rewrites that you didn't ask for, but it moves the goalposts quite often. And in particular, when you ask it to do something to a piece of code, to refactor it, for example, or to follow a certain naming convention or a coding convention, it will do it and then immediately forget that you asked it to do it for everything else it does after that. So there's a lot of remedial work. There's a lot more refactoring, for example, that needs to be done because of this, because it doesn't learn in that kind of way. It knows what it knows, in inverted commas, although it doesn't know anything. Okay, now I'm going to make two final observations on this. I think that GPT could be useful in limited circumstances. For example, if I wanted a calendar display on a web page, I could just say, oh, can you give me a calendar display? And we could go through a few iterations of, oh, how does the user navigate between months and years, and how does they schedule workshops using the calendar, and so on and so forth. So it has a huge knowledge base of ways to do things, and in that sense, it very much is like a beefed up version of Stack Overflow, of looking things up on Stack Overflow. I'm not entirely convinced that I would want it to actually write the code for me. I would like it to show me the code that it would write. And I think possibly I would feel more comfortable writing the code, reading that, understanding it, and then writing the code my way myself. Mostly because that's the best way to understand code, is to write it usually. But also, as you've seen, with the amount of time we've spent on what is relatively straightforward logic, I mean, it's how long has this taken us now? Relatively straightforward logic. I could very probably have done this by myself in the same time. Now, no doubt there will be some GPT wizards who are faster with it with me, but it won't matter because their interactions with GPT-4 are limited, and GPT 3.5 is just not up to the job. So again, I think this is going to be something that people will use potentially instead of looking it up on Stack Overflow. And that's going to save you a little bit of time every day. And that's kind of where I am with GPT at the moment and these kinds of tools. It can save you a little bit of time. I would argue in this particular instance, now I've been talking and explaining as we go, so there's that too. But I would say in this particular example, has it really saved me any time? I could have done a better job faster myself. It's left me with a bunch of code that I now need to sit down and read and try to understand. So there's that as well. And I can feel it coming. When I've tried this, I sort of tried this before a couple of times. You reach a point after you've gone through like the third or fourth test case where it just becomes too complicated, and it just becomes very difficult to keep tabs on things. So here's my final suggestion. If you're one of the developers, one of the people behind ChatGPT, here's a thought. I'm presuming that GPT under the covers has a model of the code, as it were, that we've been working on in our conversation. And I think a much smoother way of interacting at the code level with GPT would be over code itself. So how about having that model essentially committed to a GitHub repo or something like that, or pushed to a repo, to a branch that we can both access, so that when I want to bring the changes in, we're talking at the file level. I can just do a pull. I can just pull it and get the changes that GPT has done, run the test here, and then I can make my changes, push that back to the repo, and then GPT can update its model. So we can interact in the way that a lot of remote pair programmers are doing these days, people working at home. If they're sort of ping-ponging, like I'll write the test, you write the code to pass the test, or we'll do one test each or whatever, and they do that essentially by pushing to the same branch when they're ready to hand over. And I think that would work much better. Maybe that's what they're working on. That would be fantastic, because that would make this process a lot more hit and miss, a lot more convenient. But at the moment, at this scale, mm, close but no cigar. It's way more impressive than GPT 3.5. For certain, the amount of code that it's written and the amount of sense the code makes, it is a big improvement. Its refactoring skills are definitely improved. Its reasoning in inverted commas about things like refactoring, I think, is much improved. So as a pairing partner, as a driver, um, I think GPT is it's gonna I think it's gonna have its place, but I don't think its place is going to be huge. I don't think business managers are going to sit down and type into ChatGPT, make me an enterprise resource planning solution. Because the devil is in the detail. Customers want what they want, and very often they don't know what they want. And this way that we're working here, the thing that makes me really nervous is how easily will this handle changes to requirements, and that worries me, particularly as I said, you have a conversation, you've got to leave it. Do we leave that conversation live for the lifetime of the application? Is there some way of essentially resetting the context? In other words, giving it all of the code, all the source files, and saying, okay, this is where we were. But then there's all the context of why we've made the decisions we've made. And as you've seen, it forgets. We make a decision together, and then 5 minutes later, it's forgotten, and it's back to doing what it's been trained to do. So in that sense, it's like pairing with the world's most well-read idiot. Uh, but I think it's going to have limited use, and I can see circumstances where I would use it to essentially figure out how to do things. But then I would probably look at that and then write the code myself for all of these reasons. So it's Stack Overflow plus plus, basically, is how I'm seeing it at the moment. I've not used it much in other contexts, like in the business side of things, for example, or in personal things like music and so on and so forth. So I'm looking forward to exploring those. But I hear from people working in, for example, physics and teaching and all that kind of sort of disciplines where there is a lot of stuff to know. Their impression of it is the same, which is it is initially very impressive, but then they start to realize that it doesn't really know what it's talking about. It makes stuff up. It's still, even at GPT-4 level, it will make stuff up, particularly the reasons for doing things. Um, and it can't be trusted 100%, which means you are going to end up investing a lot of time that you think you are saving typing code or looking things up. You're going to be spending a lot of time double checking its work, basically. And that might turn out to be more time because you're double checking code you didn't write. But anyway, I think we've proven that you can, on this small level, do test-driven development with GPT-4, that you can pair program with it in a kind of traditional navigator and driver situation. I think there are some potentially, I don't know how under the covers it works, but there may be some quick wins here for OpenAI and Microsoft, where just the process by which we are interacting over code, I think could be really tightened up and really made a lot safer, and a lot easier. So, for example, storing that code in a repo that we're both essentially checking into, maybe even putting rigging up a very simple CI pipeline on it so that we're actually building it and testing it every time we check into the repo, so that we're always running those tests as we hand over, some kind of Git flow kind of situation there. There are other things I'd like to try with this. I haven't yet tried a refactoring exercise with GPT-4. I've done it with 3.5 and again, mixed results. So I'd like to try that with GPT-4. But what I'd like to really do is to just, rather than navigating, I'd like to just give it the code and go, what's wrong with this code and can you fix it, and see what it does. But I'd like, again, to do it in small, reversible steps so we can make sure that we're not breaking the thing. And if we are breaking the thing, we can easily go back to the previous version. So basically, Microsoft and OpenAI, version control. This thing needs version control. Okay, so anyway, that's been a really useful exercise for me. It's kind of built a space in my mind as to where this thing could live. As I said, sort of Stack Overflow plus plus. I think it will have its uses. I genuinely get the impression that when we're working in this kind of way, when the devil is in the detail, I don't think it scales yet, or certainly not to the level that you think, because of all of these practical, logistical impediments to it. But it's a thumbs up, it's a big improvement, and I'm hoping that GPT-5 will be an even bigger improvement. On a final note, friends of mine who work in machine learning are usually the most skeptical about the results that people say they're getting. And there's a reason for that, and that's because we have no idea whether machines will ever really be capable of the level of general intelligence that you get from a computer programmer, for example. We don't know if that's actually possible. There are many people in AI who believe it's not possible, that's not computable in the classical sense. Maybe quantum computers would be able to do it, but not this. So it may well be that programmers will always be required. As always, it feels like it's still 30 years away that we can get rid of programmers. People have been telling me, someone actually sent me a scan of an advert for a tool for basic programmers from 1981 that made that claim, no more programmers needed, etc., etc. And I've heard that claim many, many times. Like I said, I am very skeptical, but I have good reason to be skeptical because I'm actually a programmer, and two, I do try to use these tools. So I think the place for GPT at the moment is, looking stuff up in a very smart way. Maybe as the tool improves, it's going to take over more and more of the work. But I genuinely believe for the foreseeable future, probably for the rest of my lifetime, a computer programmer will need to be in the driving seat. And also, when people say, oh, well, you'll be able to eventually replace 10 programmers with just one programmer using tools like this. Maybe one day you will, but guess what happens when we can create software faster and easier? People create more software. I think the first version of Microsoft Word was a few tens of thousands of lines of code written by, one or two people, or maybe just a small group of people. Now it's more than 10 million lines of code. So yes, maybe you will. Maybe one day you will be able to take one good programmer and have them create whole systems by themselves, but there's going to be a lot more systems being created and they're going to be a lot more complicated. So I think our jobs are safe. It's been fun using it. I recommend you play with it. It's probably worth shelling out the $20 a month, even if it's just for 1 month, to see the difference between GPT 3.5 and GPT 4. It is a big leap, but it's not the leap that some people are selling it as. Anyway, that's my first video in a long while. What I'd like to do in the next edition of this little series is I'm going to flip the tables. I'm going to turn the tables around. I'll create a new session with GPT-4 and basically change the roles over. So I'm going to write the code based on what it tells me to do. So we'll do test-driven development again. I'll give it some basic requirements, and then we'll see how good it is at actually instructing programmers at playing that navigator role. That could be fun. We'll be depending on what kind of understanding, in inverted commas, it can build from the text that I give it, as to what kind of examples it can come up with to drive me. And I'll also be asking it to review my code and suggest ways in which it could be improved, ways in which it could be refactored. So we'll see how smart it really is. Okay, so that's in the next edition. Hopefully I get some time to do that in the next week or so. Hope you're taking care. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll see you soon.